Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us again on another episode of Leading on Mondays. Or actually, this is the other show. This is Leadership for the Now. And my guest for today is Gail Rudolph. Now, Gail is the author of a book called Power Up, Power Down. And I'm so excited to have her on the show and talk about that. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
All right. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. It's a beautiful sunny day here.
Where are you based?
I'm based down in Florida.
All right. So you're about in the morning. It's 10 o'clock in your time, right?
10 o'clock my time here. So we're just starting our day and you guys are ending yours.
Absolutely. Here, that's kind of the time here in Europe. So tell us a little bit about yourself for someone that doesn't know you. Now, a brief introduction.
Brief introduction. Well, I am a Cialdini method certified trainer. So there's only 12 of us in the world. I'm the one of two females, the only one in the United States. For people who aren't familiar with that, he's known as the godfather of influence. And, he teaches influence and persuasion. So I am one of his 12. I also am a Stanford Graduate School of Business Entrepreneurial Leadership graduate and have a certification in that. I am a John Maxwell team member. I'm a value-based leadership specialist and just recently wrote a book that you talked about on power dynamics. It just recently made the bestseller list with USA Today and Wall Street Journal. So I'm not at all busy.
I can imagine that. So thank you for making the time for being on the show. Really appreciate you.
So happy to be here. So happy.
Yeah. So how did you got interested in all this? Like, obviously you work with organizations at different levels and you see things that we don't see. But before we go into that, tell us a little bit about what got you interested. How did you get interested in the power dynamics, in influence, in persuasion, in getting certified with Dr. Cialdini?
Well, I always say that I'm a recovering people pleaser. So I was the youngest of 4 children, and I think my struggle with power started then because my oldest brother was 18 years older than I was. So being heard and having a voice was something I had to deal with from the time I was born. And as I grew up and I got in the workplace, I realized that there were power dynamics that were happening in the workplace that nobody was paying attention to. We all felt it. We all knew it was there. And it was really after I became certified with Dr. Cialdini that I realized that this energy that happens with power, that ebbs and flows with every interaction, was something that needed to be communicated. It was something that could be taught and learned on how to harness that. So after I received and worked under his guidance and learned from him, it helped me to be able to put some of those things down and some structure behind it.
Wow. And we're so excited to hear more about that. So tell us a little bit about how you work with organizations. Like, do you work with organizations, individuals? Tell us a little bit how people can work with you.
Yeah, I'm a consulting, training, speaker. I also do coaching. I also do team dynamics. So I pretty much fit in all of those categories. And I really focus on making sure that what you learn from my company and from me is something that you can apply, something that when you walk away, you can actually implement it. When I worked in corporate America, which I did for about 25 years, I got so tired of watching organizations throw money away on training. And 2 weeks after they were gone, everything was back to the way it was before they came. So my goal is to make sure that you actually learn the material. It's all based in science. Everything we do is scientific and research based. So it's proven principles and practices, and then we put them in easy to implement ways so that you can actually make a difference.
Wow. Yeah, I see the same challenges when it comes with training. If we don't follow up and if the training is not practical enough, then we don't make the impact that we could make.
Right. Well, the latest research, and I can't remember where it was, says that we only retain for 7 days what we've learned in some training now. So it's I mean, you think about that, that's short time.
Yeah, and in the way we live our lives and we run our businesses today, it's almost impossible to follow up every week or every 7 days, right? To be able to follow up and renew that information so it sticks, right? But it's also critical, right, to have that follow up, because otherwise we're just going to forget them.
And it's also, that's another reason why, because we have so many things coming at us, to be able to use our time wisely, to understand how influence and principles work, how our brains work and process information, so that when we're saying something to somebody, it's having the best impact it can possibly have.
Absolutely. And I think that's what you just done in your book. So I'm reading the subtitle. It says, How to Reclaim Control and Make Every Situation a Win-Win. Tell us more about that.
You know what? I take the premise in the book that you don't have the power to change anybody but yourself. You know, we spend a lot of time trying to change other people, trying to change their behavior, their minds, but truly we only have the power to change ourselves. However, Viktor Frankl talked about a space between a stimulus and a response. And in that space, if we can respond instead of react, we can actually change the interaction with people. Now, the outcome might be the same, but by responding and changing that interaction, you can change the way you and the other person feel when they walk away from the situation. And it can be done so simply by knowing how to tap into it. And I think that we just need to do that. We need to realize that we only have the power to change ourselves, but by changing ourselves, we can ultimately then change the interaction, we can change our workplace, we can change our community, and ultimately we can change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's so empowering when you realize that you have that power. You know, for some people might feel, well, there's no one to blame, right? But for others, right, they feel, oh, it's so empowering when I know that I have that power and I can control, you know, my reaction, right, my response. And I can let go of controlling other people, trying to control the environment. Here in the Nordics, you know, I'm based in Sweden, so we talk about weather a lot, right? This is a very, you know, wet, rainy, cold weather, dark right now in the winter. And so, I mean, talking about weather, weather is something you cannot influence, you cannot impact, right? You cannot change. Why
Right.
would you waste your time to talk about weather or complain about weather? And so, yeah, I really believe the power in what you're sharing.
Well, and so many times we leave a situation, and how many times do we cause ourselves anxiety and stress because we're just fine, and then we get in the shower and the next morning and we're thinking, oh, I should have said this, I should have reacted that way, I should have done this, I should have done that. And all of a sudden we get out of the shower and we're agitated about something we should have done. If we plan for those things ahead of time and know, you know, books called Power Up, Power Down, because there's two ways to harness that power. It's not domination or control. It's stepping into your power by maintaining your power, or it's power. That's power up. But the powering down is to remain and still stay in your power, but creating a level working field. So what we know is when people get pushed, they push back, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what you need to realize in any situation is when people start getting that pushing, then we can step back and power down and make it more of an even playing field so we don't get into those power struggles.
Right. So when you say power down, is actually us turning down, you know, kind of not turning down, but thinking about what we're gonna say and how is that gonna be perceived, so we don't get in that conflict or we don't escalate that conflict or that discussion. Is that
Well,
so?
yes and no. So let me give you an example. I had a problem with the car dealership when I bought the car. And in my book, you'll see some pages of power up attributes and power down attributes. And I decided I was going to actually use only those things that are in the book. So of course I walked in and got some resistance, told the person that handled that wasn't going to be there. And I simply just continued to question, well, what am I supposed to do if I get called over by a police officer and I don't have plates on my car, right? They had sent my plates, they had put the address in wrong. They gotten lost. So they finally brought somebody down, and I knew he was coming down from a set of stairs and there was a small table there. Well, powering up wasn't me raising my voice or doing what we normally think of powering up. I spread out. I put my purse over here on the small table. I kind of crossed my legs and just kind of spread out, just like the animal kingdom does of taking more space. When I started to hear him get confrontational, powering down move was to pull yourself closer and lean in. So I use tone of voice, use my space, you know, eyebrows, facial expressions to actually be able to take the conversation. And it was powering up and powering down all the way through. Eventually they got the problem solved. The next day, the general manager called and told me, I heard you were the nicest customer there was. I never raised my voice. I never, you know, I walked away smiling from the encounter. I was actually smiling. It was when we were wearing masks. I was smiling while I was doing it because they had no idea. And that's what I'm talking about with powering up. You don't dominate or control over somebody. You literally just remain in your power. You may take up space, you know, eye contact, a slower voice. I, as opposed to we or our, that tends to be a powering down. So both of them are equally as powerful, and they help you maintain your power.
Wow. So now you just made me curious enough to finish the book. So I started reading the book, but I haven't got to this chapter. That's why I wanted you to just expand on that for our viewers. And if you want a copy of the book, you can find that at gailrudolph.com, right? That's your website.
Yes,
And I
that's
think someone
right.
will gonna share that in the comment for us. So thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful, and it's so subtle, right? When it comes to those interactions, I used to be one of those. My background is engineering. I work for some automotive companies, but I was really not seeing any of this. For me, emotional intelligence was, somewhere, below ground. I was not at zero. I was -2, and I was in situations where, for example, my wife or a colleague will say, "What do you think they meant by that?" And I will say, "Well, what do you mean? They meant exactly what they said." So I was just, hearing the words, because also my communication style was very direct. I would usually hurt people by saying what I think, and so I expected them to say to me what I think. But no, it was so subtle. It was the tone of voice, it was the body language, and all of those things that I was just blind to. So if you are watching this video now and you feel like this is science, you know, it's rocket science. What Gail and I share now, you're not lost. I was there, and there is a chance for you. So yeah, thank you for sharing. This is so good. This is so good. Yeah.
There's so many ways that we step into our power, and it's that energy that just ebbs and flows. And can I tell another story?
Sure.
So I was working with a lady who, her name was Kelly, and she was trying to go up for a promotion, and her boss was kind of giving her the runaround on it. You need to do this, you need to do that. She was extremely frustrated, and she was one of those people that would take everything in and then sulk over it. I mean, she probably took it home and drove her husband crazy because she talked about it for weeks. And she worked with me, and she had one situation that happened. She said she couldn't believe how she stepped into her power. But she actually went with her boss to a meeting, and just completely by chance, she happened to be the only female in the meeting. And her boss, who was a great guy, but made a slip of the tongue and said, "Well, Kelly's here to take notes." And there would have been a time in her life where she would have sat back and got really quiet and sulked and got mad and went home. But she had been listening to, and we'd been working on stepping into her power. So instead of doing that, she did what we call the 4-second breath, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it, and breathe out for 4 seconds. And she said, "Yes, that's right. I'm developing the strategy. So I'm going to be interrupting you, and I'm going to be asking you to talk louder so I can catch every note that we have, so that I can help create the best strategy there is for us to move forward." She stepped into her power. She made her place in that meeting. She didn't make her boss mad. And she said the entire meeting, and she did go on to do a power up move, which is to interrupt a little bit. But that's kind of an example of stepping into your power.
Wow, that's so powerful. If she wouldn't have said that, she wouldn't have had the right almost to interrupt people, right? In the meeting.
Well, yes. I mean, she could have, but it would have been different. But
Yeah.
I forgot to add that her boss called her in the next morning and actually gave her the raise and the promotion she was wanting for
Wow.
months because of how she handled that situation, because she was sure of who she was and her power. And she knew that power is limitless, because it is. It's there for all of us to take.
Wow. So you're working with organizations. So tell us, what do you see leaders and organizations face like challenges in today's world, like with maybe prices going up and post-COVID and all the other things that are going around us? So what do you see some of the challenges they face?
You know, besides leaders understanding power dynamics, I think that we're seeing a lot in the multi-generational workplace. We're seeing a lot of teams that aren't functioning because they don't understand each other. They don't know how each other communicates. They don't understand why they communicate, and because of that, they're not creating the inclusive teams, which leads to another thing, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a lot of money being going to be left on the table if you're not a diverse organization, but a lot of organizations now are just hiring to check boxes as opposed to hiring for proper candidates for the position. And the problem with that is you're going to get a team that can't function at its highest level.
Yeah.
So,
That that's so true, and I see that too. And some organizations, unfortunately, just hire women because they have to hit the numbers, and also women that are given on paper like leadership positions, but they don't really feel that they have the power in a meeting like the one that you just mentioned. They don't feel that they are valued. Their opinion is not maybe asked in that meeting where they are maybe the only women, in the meeting. So yeah, I think there is still a way to go there.
I think there's a big way to go there, and we have to look at it as the right thing. I mean, there's all kinds of studies done on blind interviews, where you pick one candidate and then you go through and have the interview process again, especially with musicians where they don't have to talk, and they pick a different candidate. So it's
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. So because we know that in times of maybe challenges and downturn, there are also opportunities. Like now we talk a little bit about the challenges. What would you see would be some opportunities now that leaders and organizations have if they do some of those things right?
Well, I think one of the things that they do is they tap into everybody's potential, especially when you start talking about that multi-generational workplace. You tap into their potential. And I think that there's an opportunity to approach benefits differently when it comes to the different organizations. Because what we know now about generations, and I've developed a lot of generation programs and have proprietary programs with that, studied it a lot, is that we can't compare the 20 and 30-year-olds of today to the 20 and 30-year-olds 20 and 30 years ago. They're completely different. They're doing things like getting married, buying houses, having children later in life. So benefits for them are different than the benefits that we wanted when we started work. So I think that there's a real opportunity to have a chance to create benefits for this generation.
Absolutely. And also, it's not even like, okay, generation wise, I think many people get it, but also an employee that 2 years ago was single now maybe got into a relationship. They were motivated maybe by more money 2 years ago. Now they want more time, or they get a child, or they want to travel, or they buy a house, and all that. And if us leaders, we don't check in with them, we don't, it's like, this is like a good tailor, right? You take a measurement of your client every single time you meet the client, not use the measurements for 6 months ago, right? They might have gained a little weight or shrink a little bit.
And I sit here, sometimes I have very radical ideas, so this is what I'm going to share and put out there. But what if we had benefits that were much like health insurance, where you got to pick the plan that you wanted or pick the benefits you wanted? Yeah, so a radical
Absolutely.
idea, sometimes I get those, so you've got how, you're getting truly how my brain works.
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes some organizations I speak with, uh, they feel it's it's a challenge, right? To fit, everyone's needs in a benefit package is really a challenge. And sometimes they make a choice. They say, this is what we're going to offer. We offer this and this and this. And then we cannot offer that level of flexibility that everyone gets whatever they want, because it's difficult to manage. And then there's always going to be new demands, and we have to have a huge portfolio of benefits. But they made a choice which they feel benefits, most of their people, and that choice comes with, a vacation package, a benefits package. So yeah, but also those are more, let's say, more official, right? They might be in the contract, but also what do you do as leader? You understand that maybe Gail now wants more time. So, okay, maybe I cannot motivate her with another project. Maybe she doesn't want to take another responsibility right now. So I think there is the benefits, but then also the day-to-day life where you as a leader, you can find the right place for the people on your team and make sure that you offer them a relevant next step for them, not for you, right, 20 years ago, or for someone else.
The studies say that like 97% of employees don't feel like they're valued or ever told thank you for what they do. So you sparked my mind. What I used to do with my employees when I had a big team that worked underneath me in corporate America, I'm close enough with my team now, I don't have to do it, but I did a sheet that they filled out, which had the name of their spouse, the name of their children, their favorite sports team, their favorite candy bar, their favorite drink, their favorite coffee from Starbucks. And I would, when I caught them doing something great, I might have a candy bar that I bring and put it on their desk. And I think about the time of the day, right? Like at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you want that rush of chocolate. But little things like that make a huge difference. And we as leaders don't think about that.
Absolutely. And this is like, many leaders, if you ask them, they don't know to answer those questions. They don't know, what their employees want, and they also sometimes they feel like, oh, I should not interfere. Like I don't want to ask them, personal questions, because work is work, personal life is personal life. But we are a complete individual. We cannot just leave our personal life at home and then our, professional life at work. We carry those at home and the other way around.
Well, even if you don't feel good about your personal life, you can find similarities with people. So it's scientifically based. If you find similarities with people, you're going to create the relationship or increase the relationship. I mean, there are studies that show millions and millions of dollars that get to be saved just because you spend a few minutes having something similar that you can talk about with the other person. It's not just talk or chit chat. But do your research ahead of time, and social media makes it easy. If I know you're interested in boating, I can talk to you about boating.
Absolutely. So what is your view on what is called now the war for talent, or the great resignation, or, never apply in the first place, or the silent quitting? What do you see with the clients and the organization you're exposed to?
Well, the great resignation, I think COVID actually opened a lot of people's eyes that maybe they didn't want to be working their entire life, that they had a family and they enjoyed that. If people make that choice, I think that's up to them. We as employers are going to have to look to fill that gap somewhere. As far as the silent resigning and the silent quitting, that goes to a value problem. Then I would say you have an organization that your values may be up on the wall, but they're not in the hearts and minds of your people. And you need to take that back to the values of the people in your organization. I mean, that's an underlying current that you feel, but you don't see. And you have to address that by addressing the values that your company upholds.
Yeah, absolutely. So the person doesn't feel valued in that organization. That's why, they're looking for something else. And also, one of the things that I think the reason why it's called silent quitting, right, or silent resignation, is just because, the first sign when someone is disengaged is they become silent, right? When they don't engage, even if they argue or they tend to be against kind of the change, but they still verbalize what they think and what they want. And when they become silent, because I think there's a saying that silence in teamwork is deadly, is not gold, right?
Right. Well, and I think that goes back to, we can't change other people. As a leader, you can't change your employees. But you have to provide an environment where they can change themselves. I mean, when you think about a person that's honest, it's going to be very hard to be a silent quitter and only work up to a certain amount because their honesty kicks in. So if you are creating an atmosphere where people can grow personally, they're going to become more committed. If you're going to help them build their soft skills and those things, they're going to become more committed into their work because that now becomes who they are.
Yeah.
So I have a culture program all built on values that's amazing. I've watched people and companies change because it focuses on values. Things like honesty and hard work and productivity and judgment, and biases.
Wow, I can imagine, and these are things that do not usually come up, to the surface in organizations. These are not things that organizations talk about,
Nope.
and they need to go to programs like this for those discussions to be triggered and for people to talk about that and to see if they are aligned on values or if they're not aligned on values, or what does it mean, the values that we have on the wall, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's underlying and everybody feels it, but nobody knows how to deal with it, and it takes time. My program is 10 weeks, half an hour a week for your team. It's a given. It's developed so that it does not point any fingers at anybody, so everybody can be safe in the environment. And it really focuses on themselves. They set weekly goals for themselves, not for the team, not for anything else. The hardest thing is for leaders to keep their mouth shut during the process because they want to interject, and it's like, no, this is a process that moves people along.
Wow. So if someone was interested to learn more about that, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can go on to GailRudolph.com and there's a place to schedule an appointment. So just schedule an appointment. We'll talk about things like that.
Absolutely. So we are almost at the top of our time. We have 30 minutes, but I have two more personal questions, maybe one personal and one more generic. But the one that I would like to hear from you is, what was the best leadership advice you ever got? How did that help you? Maybe who was from, something a little bit personal.
So my best leadership advice came from a hospital system CEO. He was I reported directly up to him. He was always studying leadership. He was building into his managers and directors all the time. And the one thing that he taught me is to always remember that your people are your biggest asset. He said they don't show up as a line item on your P&L, but they are what make your P&L. And that was the biggest piece of advice I had, because so many times we think people are disposable and, I'll just, get somebody else to do your job. Well, there's a lot of cost that goes with that, not to mention, the dynamics that happen with bringing new people in and people leaving. But his philosophy about they aren't have a line item on your P&L, they make up the entire P&L, was pretty. It influenced me. It was pretty influential to me at the time, and has stuck with me.
Wow, and it's very easy because we have been taught that there is a human resources department, right? And if you think about resources, like paper, I have a printer here, like. Paper, it's a resource that I use and I dispose, right?
Right.
And that's why we might just be programmed to see people that way. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's so good. Now, the last question we ask our guests is, what does leadership means for you today? How would you describe it in a word or a sentence?
Leadership for me is interchangeable with power, and it's the same definition. It's that you simply have the ability to influence others or a course of action that moves others to get things done.
Well, say that again, because it's so good.
It's the ability to influence others or a course of action that moves other people to get things done.
Wow, that's so good. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was lovely having you on the show. Is there anything else you want to add, or something that we didn't touch on that you think you want to add in?
There's so much that when you start talking about soft skills and leadership, I mean, we could be here for days. So, but yeah, I think we've covered a good majority of people to be able to take a nugget home with them, hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for making the time. And if you are watching this and you want to get in touch with Gail Rudolph, so you can find her on LinkedIn, you can find her on her profile on this show, and also at her website, gailrudolph.com. All right. Thank you for coming, Gail.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much. And I look forward to see you again with another guest on another episode. Thank you for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye.